everyone for joining us. Again, any questions? Top right, there's a chat bubble. We'll get to you at the end. It looks like everyone's doing a pretty good job, but please just try to stay diligent about staying on mute. And again, this will be recorded, and we will share a version of this towards the beginning of next week. With that, I think we have a great session planned for today, and I want to introduce our host, Vince Vitiello, the president of New America Marketing, and he'll introduce our guest.
Great. Thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for joining us. I know we have a large contingent of folks on, and we have a really exciting program today. Today we will address the journey of the African American insurance professional, and we will have some super guests, which I'll introduce in just one moment. But before that, Chris, if you would go to the next slide. LIMRA shared with us a few years back the ethnic makeup of financial advisors, and whether it's in insurance or in finance, it's pretty alarming and very interesting statistics. 81% of financial advisors are white, and interestingly enough, about 64% of America is white. So pretty over-indexed to more white advisors than the population. Asians represent 7% of financial advisors, which is pretty interesting because about 7% of the US happens to be Asian, so very tightly aligned with the population. If you look to the right of your screen, you'll see African Americans represent 6% of financial advisors, and the US is made up of about 15% of African American population. So really under-indexed. So today, our speakers will address maybe three broad things. And by the way, our agenda today is pretty informal. I have a few questions, but I have a feeling with our two guests, they'll carry on a conversation without many questions. But they'll address probably three things. The first is the reasons why there aren't as many Black advisors as represented to what the population looks like. Number two, what are some of the obstacles and some of the personal learnings and experiences they've had? And lastly, what might be some of the solutions that folks on the line today could actually take with them and utilize in their business to help drive revenue, but also have a very diverse field force. I really have the pleasure of introducing two friends, and first I'd like to introduce Aselfi Taylor. Aselfi is the founder and the president of Taylor Insurance and Financial Services, located in Pasadena, California. He serves families, business owners, and high net worth folks. Aselfi, I would say, was an athlete, but also is an athlete. If you look on his website, you'll see he is an incredible athlete, but he got a basketball scholarship to Concordia College and also graduated magna cum laude. He's also been the main platform speaker in the insurance world. He's become a household name in the insurance business, actually a household name in my household. So we talk about Aselfi a lot. At New York Life, he was the leading producer that served the African American market in the entire United States, top of the table producer. And he has developed something called the Taylor Method, which teaches advisors across the United States on not how to sell, but how to solve problems. Lastly, or two last things. In last year's Super Bowl, LinkedIn did a TV commercial, and one of the features on the commercial was a selfie. And when you ride the New York City subways, there's a selfie's picture all over the subways. He has three girls who are really beautiful, does a lot of charity things, and he's a workaholic. Aselfi, great to have you on the call.
Thank you, Vince.
The other gentleman to your left is Gary Smith. Gary's been a friend for over 30 years. He and his wife helped shape the diversity strategy for MetLife some time ago, and he and I also worked together at Allianz Life. He and his wife founded Ivy Planning about 30 years ago. Both are Ivy League graduates, hence the name of the firm, Ivy Planning. Gary consults large corporations, CEOs, board of directors, employees, not just here in the United States, but on a global basis. He's been called the pioneer of diversity, He's won numerous community and leadership awards. As I said, he's married to Janet, has 3 sons that are part of his firm, and doing an incredible, incredible job. So I'll open it up with a question, and then I'll ask first a selfie, and then Gary, if you could chime in and just talk about the first question is, why are there so few Black producers, managers, and corporate leadership, whether it's financial services or other? But a selfie, give us your thoughts on that.
I think there's a number of reasons. I think the number one thing is that it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because there's not a lot of advisors, or as many African American advisors that come into the business and then transition into management or corporate roles. There's fewer people for others coming behind them to model, right? So if you were to ask the average African American advisor today, what top African American advisor do you look up to? Unless you know, there's really only a handful of people, right, that they can even point to, and depending on the company that they're affiliated with, there might not be anyone, right? So at least for me, growing up in a relatively affluent area, upper middle class, I wasn't even privy to this career and the opportunities that it could afford me, and that's growing up in a in a decent area. So you figure, whether it's growing up in a affluent middle class or even lower income area, financial planning and the work that we do as advisors is very much misunderstood, or I think people have no idea what we do. Hell, I had no idea what I was going to be doing even when I agreed to be a financial advisor, right? So I think a lot of it just comes down to exposure and education that's sorely lacking. I think that's the root of it.
Great, thank you. Gary, what's your thought? You've worked in other corporations and you've worked in the insurance and financial services world. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Selfie's right. I think first and foremost, the discipline itself, the profession itself, is sort of, it's like a secret society. People don't even know it exists. So I think that's one part of it. But I think the piece that's even more prevalent, quite frankly, is it's a relationship business. And so the reality is, it's fine that you don't know this business exists. The key is the people that do know don't have relationships across differences. So you think about the number of people where someone says to you, I think you'd be good at this. I think I think you have the chops to do this. And so the number of people in this business that were probably invited in by someone saw something in them and they said, you should give this a shot. You should try this. If given your makeup, I think you'd do fine at this. So people encourage you, and through relationships, you're invited in. Well, if this is a relationship sport and people lack relationships across differences, then they're not going to, the people they're going to ask to participate in this business are disproportionately going to look like them. And if your number of 81% happen to be white, and their relationships don't span across difference, their invitations are going to disproportionately be to people that look like them. And I'm not blaming them for that. Quite frankly, I actually like the fact that it's a relationship business. I just need people to have better relationships so more people get invited in.
Right. Good. Gary, I'll point this to you and then go to a selfie. You started your career actually not in the diversity space. You were in sales also, a leading salesperson for IBM. And so did you have a mentor when you started in your career?
Yeah, mentors were important. I had people that looked out for me early. I got to IBM, quite frankly, as a co-op student. I got to IBM when I was still in college. And literally some pretty senior people looked out for me. They told me, hey, look, you're not going to law school. You're going to come work for us when you graduate. Here's what the profession's going to look like. Here's what your career is going to look like. And it's funny, Vince, the year I was rookie of the year at IBM, the marketing manager I had was Black. The branch manager I had was Black. The regional manager I had was Black. And so to Selfie's earlier point, when I looked up the career ladder at IBM, I saw people that looked like me. And literally the people that looked like me were saying, oh, by the way, you can do this. the jobs we're sitting in are going to be the jobs you're going to have. It's just a timing issue. So I had proof positive that I could do it. And so whenever I found somebody sort of yelling at me or telling me I wasn't getting it done, or somebody had their foot up my butt to do better, often that person looked like me. And so I didn't have to question the motivation behind it. I knew exactly why somebody was giving me a hard time, because the only variable was they must want me to do well because they look like me, they're ahead of me on the journey, and are they riding me hard. And
Right.
feedback was a critical piece, so it's perfect.
Right. Good point. A Selfie mentor in your career?
I don't know that I can point to any one person per se that and it's maybe a little feedback from someone might need to mute. Yeah.
We can hear you, Selfie.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would say that there's not one particular person that I would say mentored me. I feel like, I got a number of lessons from a lot of people. Unfortunately for me, I had to go about this on my own, right? I didn't have any other advisors really that African-American advisors that I could emulate. And some of it for me, which I would certainly encourage people coming behind me to do is and this wasn't the right thing that I did, is I didn't want anyone to be able to claim my success, right? So I wanted to be able to say, I blazed this trail, I did it on my own, nobody did this for me, I did it myself. So I was really isolated for a good number of the first few years of my career. And when I started at New York Life, I didn't celebrate any of my council achievements until I made the top 1% of the company. So I never went on any award trips. I never took any of the gifts. I said, nope, I'm not celebrating anything but being number one. So when I made this first pinnacle and I made this award trip, there was maybe 5 or 6 other African-American advisors who'd reached this. And there was maybe 300 qualifiers in the company, and there were 6 of us there. And they told me, you have what it takes to be council president. You have what it takes to be number one in this company. And similar to your story, Gary, it was that push and that that vote of confidence, and more so the expectation that was set before me that I had to reach greater heights. Because I think the biggest thing is people want to be successful, and truthfully, this isn't an African American problem or a white person problem or an Asian person or an Indian. I think even the people that want to be successful and are willing to do the work, the problem is that many of us just don't have a path. We don't know what course of action do we actually need to take to get there.
Yeah, good.
Hey, Vince.
Yeah, sure.
Can I just respond to something a Selfie said a minute ago? Because I want to let the audience know how prevalent it is. The number of times that people believe that they want to do this on their own, literally to do it by themselves without help. There's something in our wiring, and it's not everybody's wiring, but a Selfie definitely represents a type. And one of the things that happens is it's the same way that folks really they'll drill down, they'll hunker down, but they also won't always use the resources that are available to them. And so I get it. I get the drive and the passion. And Selfie is absolutely right. I see it a lot. But I want to remind people, every now and then the system was actually built to get some of those roadblocks out of your way, and to not have to sort of figure it out from scratch. So I just want to stress that for those folks that think the only path through this is strictly drive and determination, somebody out there is using drive and determination. Somebody else that's ahead of you on the journey actually went and had a beer with somebody.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, the beer broke more ties than the drive and determination.
Yeah, no,
did. So
it's a very valid point. I mean, J. Paul Getty is the first recorded billionaire in United States history, and he came up with the wealth building principle. Stated simply, I'd rather earn 1% effort from 100 people than 100% of my own. So one of the things, I'm the son of a West African. Man, you put 4 West Africans in a room, 3 of them have some kind of postgraduate degree, right? So my dad when I was growing up, he's like, how many PhDs you're going to get, right? And so this huge onus on education and work ethic was instilled upon me, but not the value of relationships and networking. And that's something that I had to learn on my own, because at the end of the day, and every single person on this call can attest to this, how many really, really smart people, capable people do you know that make 50 grand a year? And then how many multimillionaires have you met that you scratch your head like, wow, like that person makes that much money? And it was because, not because they were the smartest person in the world, but I guarantee you they had really good relationships and they're engaged in some kind of business activity that has scale to it, right? And so those are the things that I had to learn, like, well, the hard way, right? You know, that's why I'm on this call today, right? Like I'm a huge failure. Right. I was just so resilient and kept standing back up that I made it to this point. But if I can give insights and tools and give a pathway, if you will, to the people coming behind me, then I'll certainly do that.
And a selfie, it's funny because if I were to sift through a stack of resumes right now, strip everything off the resume but education, I promise you the more degrees I see on a resume, the more I can start to predict the race of the person. Mm-hmm. And so, generally speaking, people of color will be overeducated and underemployed. Mm-hmm. So relative to the opportunities for them, they will have more degrees, but will not have achieved the level of success that you would have thought given those degrees. So when we land in corporate America, again, I said it a minute ago, I tell people before you get that second master's, how about you just go have a beer with some people? How about you go spend time with the people that are ahead of you on this journey and let them show you what success looks like and let them tell you how they got there? Because most of them are not going to tell you they went and got another degree. As much as I value education, believe me, I do.
Yeah. Hey guys, we're kind of going down the path of becoming a successful advisor as a Black person. One of the questions I want to flip to you is, obviously on the call today, there are a lot of white managers, probably male white managers. And so one of the questions I pose to both of you is, what mistakes do the white managers make in trying to attract, retain Black advisors? What are the typical mistakes? I see Gary's got his hand up first. So Gary, why don't you go?
The number one mistake that people lead when they lead across difference is they're afraid to give critical feedback. One of the single biggest predictors of organizational success is feedback. And when you find yourself as a leader, especially when you're leading across difference, when you have to spend all weekend figuring out how to tell somebody something, and you spend all weekend I don't want them to think that, I'm doing this because of race. And so you literally spend the weekend packaging the advice. You come back to work on Monday, and then you say, well, it really wasn't that bad. I mean, they didn't burn the building down. Nothing terrible happened. And you never give them the feedback. So I would argue that if I were coaching, and when I coach white executives, what I would say is, number one, feedback is a requirement. But you have to set the table for that feedback before you're giving. You have to tell people, I'm giving you the feedback you need to be successful. The second piece, though, and I think it's equally important, is not understanding that people are different, that culturally, the things that drive people are different, the things that make people happy, the things that make people excited. So finding that cultural connection. I mean, I have literally talked to Black representatives, where people have said to Black agents, don't waste your time calling on the Black community. And so, I want you to think about that advice. And it's not because you shouldn't be calling on all kinds of people, but if you tell somebody to ignore their own people, then in essence, it's almost like an editorial comment on them. So I think some of the advice has to be, you got to call on everybody in this business. You don't have the luxury of only calling in a narrow way. You got to call broadly. But telling someone to call broadly is different than telling, well, their cancellation rate's going to be higher, their policies are going to be smaller. I know all the myths of ethnic marketing. Vince and I have been talking about multicultural marketing for years. So I know all the stories and I know what the data says. But you've got to have the power and the passion to say, you call on your own, you call on people you call on everybody, because that's what it's going to take to win. But be very careful how you package the conversations around telling people what to do in their own markets.
Right. Gary, I just want to opine on one point you just made, then I'll go to a selfie thought. The point you just made, Chris and I, who's also hosting the call, we read a white paper about
No pun intended.
issue in financial services. And it was probably a 10-page white paper. And after I read the white paper, I said to Chris, the one point that they didn't come up with was exactly what you came up with. And that is, white managers will typically say, don't call upon Black or Hispanic clients or potential clients. And then in this exhaustive study, that was one of the major points that they missed, only because I think it was politically incorrect to put that into the report. But I'm glad you brought that up. Selfie, what's your thoughts? So you've been around the insurance business. You see most led by male tail and stale guys like myself. What's the issue about attracting folks to the career?
You have to have perspective, and so I'm gonna say two things. One, equality. Treat your advisors the same. If your ultimate goal is to build a successful agency force comprised of African American advisors, Hispanic advisors, white advisors, Asian advisors, then hold everyone to the same standard and expect everyone to reach the top. We don't grade on a curve here, right? It's everyone should be held to the same standard. This even goes through to the marketing aspect. I remember when I was at New York Life, I was shown a sales piece, and the sales piece featured a young African American family and said, you can buy term insurance for as little as $25 a month, right? And I said to the head of the cultural markets who handed me this piece, he goes, look, we've created a piece for the African American market. And I said, man, get this trash out of my face. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, if you spent your time trying to sell $25 a month policies, you'll starve. You won't make it in this business. Why don't you show a piece with an African American businessman showing if you put in $50,000 a year of premium, this is the benefit that you're going to get from it. So the bar was set so low, right? I mean, there again, using my time in New York Life, there was an agent I met who literally wrote 300 policies in the year and didn't make 50 grand. I'm like, how is that even possible, right? How small were these policies, right? And so the thing that I found, it's easier to make $1 million a year in this business than make 50,000. 50,000 was hard for me, Vince. That was hard. $1 million, that's big. So I would say hold everyone to the same bar, but then understand that culturally, African Americans have the least semblance of loyalty amongst their ethnic group than any other culture, right? So Jewish people will support and do business with Jewish people. Hispanics will support and do business with Hispanics. Whites will support and do business with whites. Blacks are, whether white people tell them or not, blacks are inherently taught to not trust each other and not do business, with each other. So that's something that and in general, we don't have on a broad scale, like I'm over generalizing here, the same level of financial literacy and visibility to wealth because there's been a lack in generational wealth and on a macro level that we have. So it's not that African Americans are going to lapse their policies more, they can't afford as much premium. They simply just need to be shown the path, educated.
Yeah, great points. Gary, I'm going to switch to you and ask this question. So most of the financial services, as we discussed, is dominated by male and white folks. And so obviously there are a lot of these folks that would like to recruit diverse advisors, whether it be Black or Asian or Hispanic. But unfortunately, where they fish, meaning where they're prospecting, is most of these guys belong to a white country club. They live in the suburbs. They are really not familiar with sources and where to go. And so their pool of candidates typically are going to look like their centers of influence, where they play. And so the same thing with advisors. So if you were coaching corporate leaders, whether it be a corporate leader or looking to create board members or looking to recruit advisors that were diverse, what would you say about their mindset? What would you be coaching them on their mindset about making that shift?
So the order for me would be number one, you cannot believe that diversity equals less than. You can't believe that racial difference is less than. So I'd ask the question, what do your peer networks look like? Do you have peer relationships? Because if your first exposure to difference is that you volunteer at a nonprofit, and so it's really hard to break the mental cycle of I volunteer and I help these poor disadvantaged people, and then you walk out of that building and you think, well, one of those folks could make me rich, or one of those folks could run my company one day. I mean, wait a minute. You literally were just sitting there at the soup. I mean, I volunteer all you want. I'm not saying you shouldn't volunteer and do charitable work, but I don't want you to think when it's time to hire, promote, when it's time to staff a board, I don't want your first conscious thought to be somehow we're going to have to lower the bar to do that. So it starts with the number one mindset shift is in seeing your equal when you're having this conversation. The second thing I'd remind everyone is there's more difference around you than you believe. You are the workplace is a great example of this. The workplace might be one of the last places that is as rich and robust, as diverse as anywhere. Your country club might not be, your neighborhood might not be, but the workplace is going to expose you to some rock stars. And the mistake we make is that when we're recruiting for our businesses sometimes, or recruiting for a board, we always start by thinking, is this person a good fit for the job I'm trying to fill? What you have to do when you're recruiting across difference is you start by forging relationships with peers, even if they aren't the actual candidate. So if somebody's a dentist and they're a person of color, and you know good and well they're not going to stop being a dentist to be an agent for you. But guess what? They're a dentist. They're successful. They make money. They think a certain way. Their peer network is going to be people that look like them. And so the conversation is, hey, look, I'm not trying to recruit you, but I am curious, who do you know? Who should I be talking to? The next time you get some guys together to play golf, invite me. I want to be a part of your foursome because I know your foursome is going to look different than my foursome. I know when you're out on the boat, your boat's going to have a different group of people on it. I want to get on your boat. And so to me, it's whenever I'm recruiting across difference, I am recruiting peer relationships, and then I let those peer relationships get me to the actual candidates or targets that I'm looking for. I would never start off by saying I'm only going to talk to the people that I think can fill the slot I'm trying to fill.
Great point. Selfie, as you look at your client base, I'm sure you have a diverse client base. So similar to the question that I asked Gary, if talking about management, how would a manager begin to get fish in a diverse pool? How did you begin to fish in a diverse pool of clients? Because obviously not all of your clients are Black or white or Asian, but how did you create that diverse pool of clients?
Yeah, I mean, a little, maybe I'd say easier, but I live in Southern California, right? So it's a melting pot. I went to school with Black kids, white kids, Asian kids, Indian kids, Armenian kids, right? Filipino kids. So in my very community, there's a lot of people that I'm around. I think the great unifier for me, there is a color that I focus on. I am definitely going after a color, right? And that's green, right? And so if you can write a check, right? If you can write a check, then you fall in my prospect list. So I can't tell you how many times he meet a Hispanic person. They'll tell me, a Hispanic advisor, I'm like, man, you don't understand yourself. Mexicans don't buy life insurance. I'm like, you know how many Hernandez and Lopez and Chavez's I have in my client file? You mean you don't know how to sell life insurance, right? So I'm meeting people at their level, and I think that's what it means. I know how to say hello, how are you in 8 languages, because what I do is I want to meet people at their level, right? So there's a time for me to have the suit and tie and to walk into the boardroom. There's a time for me to have shorts and flip-flops and hang out at the beach with people. There's a time for me to be in khakis and jeans when I'm on the farm. I'm going to meet them at their level. And I think the best advice I can give to a manager is learn to relate and learn to find out what makes your advisors tick and what makes them go. And because that's when you say, this is the way I do things, and everyone must conform to me, then you're lost, right? I tell my clients, It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what I would want. It doesn't matter what I do. It's not my life. It's not my money. I want to know you. I want to know what you want to accomplish. And same thing for advisors. I'm meeting an advisor. Tell me about your life. Tell me about where you want to see your practice, right? What are some of the challenges that you're facing? Stop assuming, right? Or putting your experience or bias on that person, and meet them at their level.
Great point.
For sure.
Great point. Gary, in your career, and then I'll ask also for a selfie, in your careers, what types of stereotypes have you had to overcome? And what advice would you give folks who maybe created those stereotypes for you?
Yeah, there are a lot of stereotypes. One is, people make huge assumptions about sort of what people believe, what people are capable of. So I think the biggest stereotype is just people doubting what you can do. I mean, I think that's the ultimate one, is that somebody will decide. Now, I was aided in a lot of ways professionally, because by the time I got to an IBM, I had a series of other institutions that had validated me. Being at the Smithsonian as a photographer was a big deal. You don't get to do that. I got to do that. Going to Yale was a big deal. So in some ways, what I did was I actually used to rely on people's bias, because bias is both positive. There's confirmation bias too. So while there's the bias of what people might think you can't do, or the stereotypes of what people think you can't do, if people are going to have a almost goo goo gaga bias about Yale, well, my license plate was going to say Yale 82. It absolutely was, and it still does, because some days I've got to feed the bias. And but I think that the other big bias was that people really didn't think that we were going to be good salespeople. For me, a lot of people just thought, Black folks aren't going to go into sales. Black folks are going, law, medicine, the professions, and that we won't be good salespeople because deep down our people don't like to sell. And I used to tell people all the time, I said, let me make sure you understand this. I'm not trying to sell anything, but if I solve people's problems, they're going to miraculously buy from me a lot. If I just make a steady diet of fixing things that are broken for people and understanding the things in people's lives that are broken and demonstrating that I can fix whatever that thing is, then I'm going to be all right. And that's all I ever, my entire career was spent fixing broken stuff for people. Now, I will say one other bias, one other stereotype is, more often than not, I tended to get the thing that was broken, because if it was already running on all cylinders, they wouldn't have given it to me. So I said I was rookie of the year my first year, but I got a territory that was busted. It wasn't supposed to go anywhere. And I just turned lemons into lemonade. Same thing with the first, the first national, I had a big national job running something for a company, and it was broken. It hadn't made the numbers in years. It was falling apart. I went to get it. I took the job because it was broken, but it also gave me the opportunity and the reach to do some things. So the one stereotype is, early in my career, I didn't tend to get things that were running on all cylinders. I tended to get I was gifted things that were broken, and I had to be smart enough to fix them.
Smart. Good. A selfie stereotype?
Oh yeah, I love those. I have never been a conformist, right? This last September marked my 20th year in business. So September 4th was 20 years to me, my 20-year anniversary. And I look pretty good right now, right, Vince? I was 12 years old when I started in the business. So you can only imagine what I looked like 20 years ago, right? I looked like I was 15 years old. And I was coming out of playing basketball in college, so I didn't cut my hair. I didn't cut my hair for 7 years. Okay, so I had long hair. I had my hair in braids, and I used to love speaking to people on the phone, scheduling an appointment with them, and either going to their home or them coming into my office and being like, like you're the one I was speaking to. And then not 30 minutes later, their arms wide open, embracing me like, oh my God, where were you 20 years ago? And I used to jokingly say I was in elementary school, but what I loved about that, and one of the reasons that, and interestingly enough, I purposely did not cut my hair until I made that top 1% in New York Life, because I wanted to teach people, judge people based on their merit, judge people based on their aptitude, not what they look like. And I could literally see the expression on people's faces change, and I that drove me. I loved it. Now the one thing that I want managers and understand, you impart this to the advisors that you're recruiting, is that we are in a position to solve what I call a drowning man's issue. And what I mean by that is, if you were in a boat, right, in the middle of the ocean that tipped over, and you were flailing around for your life, right, just trying to survive, and I came by in a lifeboat with a life preserver, do you care if that life preserver is yellow, green, orange, purple? You really don't care, do you? Please just throw it to me. And this is the position that we are in as advisors, right? I don't care if you're white, black, Hispanic, Asian. If you do not have insurance, right? If you do not have insurance and something happens to you, there's a problem, right? And I'm here to solve that problem. If you have inadequate savings for retirement, right, and your retirement plan isn't built out, you have a problem. You have a drowning man's issue. You're in no position to tell me you don't like my skin color, nor do you like my suit, nor do you like my hair, right? You're drowning. And by all means, right, don't take my advice. Good luck to you, right? Or right, or take this life preserver, right? It's a simple choice. And so I think in general, when we can flip the narrative from being a needy, like you guys are selling, you're trying to get commissions, because I'll tell you this, any commission that I make represents maybe 1% of my income. Yet the work that we do represents 100% of people's future income. So who needs who? So when you have that bravado, like I had, like, I don't need you. Yes, I love your business. But I don't need you, because it's 12 o'clock right now. I have a 2 o'clock. So if you don't buy from me, I have a meeting right after this one. But I tell you what, right? I'll be okay. But if you don't buy from me and something happens to you, something happens to your family, they're in a horrible spot, right? And so I always approached it where you know, it's not white, black, Hispanic. It's am I here? Do I have value? Right? Can I help you? And regardless of my color, my skin color, my age, my gender, my sexual orientation, doesn't really matter, right? If you can help solve that drowning man's issue, then do the business.
Great. That's
So Vince,
great point, Gary.
Vince, if a selfie is going to take that approach to his customers, I want the producers and the leaders and the managers and the owners on this call to take the same approach to talent. In other words, a selfie just said, I'm saving a drowning man by giving them an opportunity. I'm doing something they need. Well, I want to remind the people on this call who the beneficiaries are of hiring people that don't look like you. It's not them, it's you. You're the beneficiary of having a team that's more diverse and less diverse. Diverse talent is going to be fine. Talented people are going to, a selfie was going to land on his feet if you threw him out of an airplane at 30,000 feet. He was going to be fine. That's the difference. Talented people are going to do fine. The question is, are they a part of your organization? Are they inside making you rich? Are they contributing to your well-being as a producer? And so I don't understand why we would ever deny somebody a chance to make us rich in a different package. And so we got to open our minds up to what talent looks like. The last thing I'll say about this is, I hear fascinating numbers on the failure rate in this business. You know, sometimes I hear 60%, sometimes I hear 70%, sometimes I hear 80%. Keep going, right? Well, here's my thing. Every one of these big companies I know has an exhaustive mechanism for deciding who they let do this. Well, are you telling me that the exhaustive clearance I've got to go through to get into this business is so good that it fails greater than 80% of the time? Then that's not a test. That's not a system. What system fails 80% of the time? I mean, you could almost say let everybody try with a failure rate that's that high. So I don't understand why people are so selective about who they let fail. I mean, if you presented me with a failure rate in my business that looked like that, I'd give a lot of people a shot. I really would. So being narrow-minded in who you let try this is just backwards to me. I've never understood it.
Great point. Hey, Chris, I don't know if there are questions, but maybe just give a commercial about how to ask a question. And I got just a few more questions for the selfie and Gary.
Great. I think some people have already seen the chat box and have asked a couple questions about getting the recording. So again, up at that top right area, you'll see 4 icons. One of them is the person icon. One of them looks like a little comic book chat bubble. If you have any questions, just go ahead and type it in there and we'll get to you.
Yeah, so Gary and a selfie will record this, and we'll get over 3,000 views of this. So we'll edit it
Thanks.
and make it tighter. Gary and a selfie, here's a personal question I'd like to ask both of you. I know a selfie, you have 3 beautiful girls, and Gary, you have 3 grown sons. Gary, what do you tell your sons? They're black. They're in this world, which is somewhat diverse but somewhat not diverse. What do you tell your sons?
So Vince, first and foremost, I am very blessed because I get to raise 3 black men with a phenomenal black woman. So having my wife and partner and having her be, you know, sort of mindful about what we're doing, because this is a lot harder to do by yourself. So the first thing is I have a great partner that I'm doing this with. The second thing I'll say is I never set out to raise black boys. I set out to raise black men. So from the very beginning, my goal was to produce 3 accomplished black men, accomplished to be determined by them, not by me. And so what did I tell them? I said, look, the world doesn't play fair, and you're black. And so I did have I had to teach my sons, how do you survive a traffic stop? You know, a successful traffic stop is the one you drive away from, not the one where you talk yourself out of a ticket or talk them out of a ticket. So I taught them to survive in the world that I knew they were going to live in. So it isn't that I set out to make them racist, but I set out to prepare them for a world that might not always play fair, a world that might disadvantage them sometimes, but that's just an excuse. So then the question becomes, how are you going to push through? How are you going to show up? What are the tools and tactics that you can rely on if you're going to be successful? You know, whether that's good communication, whether that's relationships, whether that's being smart, but not being, you know, smart alecky, you know, learning and learning how to get along with people, learning how to thrive in an environment that wasn't built for you. Because that's the one thing that I would say. Most of the time, if you're a person of color, you land on a planet that may not have been built with you in mind, but it doesn't mean you can't thrive on that planet despite that. So did they build it where I was supposed to become, you know, the leader of the free world? Well, look what happened. They didn't build it with that in mind, but that's what did happen. We did end up with the leader of the free world being a person of color. You know, so a lot of this is about attitude and discipline. But I do think, having raised 3 black boys, 3 black men, I think that ultimately what I learned was, given a few tools, a few tactics, faith being one of them, because religion does play a part in our lives as well, but giving a few tools and tactics, I knew they could win. And it was all about winning. It was about never, ever letting them decide that they could just give in.
Great. Super. The selfie, what do you tell your girls, being people of color and growing up? And
Yeah, I mean, I tell my girls the same thing I was told when I was coming up, and that was to be the best or among the best. I was never told that to be the best black or that I could get so far, but right, I was just told be the best, period, right? And so, you know, I don't believe in putting limitations or ceilings on myself, nor would I teach that to my girls. I do, however, want them to be aware. I want them to be aware that for a myriad of reasons, whether someone, because of your skin color or your gender or your clothes, what have you, there's a myriad of reasons why someone can try to discriminate against you or say, you know, nasty things or try to hold you down. But, you know, as long as you believe in yourself, right? You believe in yourself, you hold yourself in the highest regard, and you have integrity and do the right things. That's all you can do, right? And that's how I raise them. The rest will take care of itself. I always look at the glass half full rather than glass half empty. You know, how many people in my career haven't done business with me because I'm black? You know, I don't know. But then how many people have outward told me I want to do business with a black man? Like, oh, well, you know, all right, then I'll take that, right? And you know, so glass half full, glass half empty. Maybe someone wants to do business with me because I'm young. Maybe someone wanted to stay away from me because I'm young. Maybe because they only want to do business with a woman or whatever. My point is, there's so many people and so much money out there that you, to your point, Gary, you need to have a diverse marketplace of advisors to capture all of it, because there is no one person. Although, Vince, I'm doing my damnedest to write all the insurance myself and take all the money myself. I can't do it. I tried. I'm giving up. I can't. Please, people on the call, help me, please. Right. So there's so much opportunity out there, and again, white, black, Hispanic. Don't confuse someone being successful with being a good planner. Most people, some of the most successful people I've ever met have the worst planning, right? And this isn't a black person's problem, white. It's something that's true across the board. So again, don't discriminate in hiring. Don't discriminate in who you're talking to, because you never know who they are, right? Who they could be. And again, to your point, I like what you're saying. I think the statistic is something like an 88% failure rate after 3 years. I think it's 66% in the first 6 months. So if 34% of your advisors are going to make it past 6 months anyway, you might as well swing away, right? Like.
Great. Thank you, Aselfi. Hey guys, my last question is this. So with companies that you've worked with, if you could wave a magic wand and say, hey, here's one change that you're the CEO of this organization, you're the leadership organization, that I'd like to see you make, what would that one change be to become more of a diverse organization? Gary?
Sure. The changes that we asked for, quite frankly, no gaps. That's my goal. My goal is no gaps. And let me tell you what I mean by no gaps. In every way that you can measure the experience of what your organization does, there should be no gaps. So if you think about engagement scores, if you thought about engagement scores in your organization, or people's happiness, or people's success, there should be no gaps it's certainly not gaps that are discernible by race or ethnicity or gender or by sexual orientation. Those things should not produce gaps. Now, if they're talent gaps, if they're performance gaps, okay, fine, that happens. But even when they're performance gaps, you better make sure that you're not contributing those performance gaps, because you're not coaching them up the same way. You're not leading the same way. You're not teaching the same way. So the number one thing I want to see is no gaps. That's what I want. Second thing I want to know is, given the opportunity and the fact that smart people do not come in narrow packages, they come in all kinds of packages. Talented people are dispersed across all kinds of differences. Then I ask the organization, why is your organization not even representative of the talent that's available to you? Because that should be easily explainable. Why is it that talent is out there in all kinds of packages, and you don't seem to know how to find your fair share of all of that talent? And then the last thing I'd say is, if there are gaps in your system and there are gaps in the talent representation in your organization, then you need to figure out, how are the systems that you're using? I don't assume I'm talking about biased people. How are the systems you're using producing a biased result? So if you're only going to one school to recruit, then I'm asking, why are you only going to that school? But here's what's so funny, Vince. Even when people's bias around things like recruiting, I don't care if you go to Harvard or Howard, there are talented Black people, there are talented Asians. I mean, they're talented people no matter where you go. So in a way, if you go shopping at any store and you don't come home with groceries, then you got to look in the mirror and say, what am I doing to contribute to that? So those are the things I'd say. What are the systems that are getting in the way? Why is it that people who are talented aren't represented in an equitable way? And then why are there gaps? And why is that, knowing there are gaps, you're not doing something to close those gaps?
Great points. Thank you, Gary. Aselfi?
Sure.
I would just say, like I said before, hold everyone to the same standard, give everyone the same opportunity. I would tell you, because the one thing that I would notice, the failure rate's the failure rate, right? If it goes down, if the majority of people fail, they fail. One of the biggest things that I see as a problem is those that actually do show promise, the ones that do make it over that hump, they're not given the support and the tools to then take it to an even higher level. So that's the thing that I'd say. It's not a problem that any one particular carrier has. The retention issue is an industry issue, right? But it's also one where, why do so many advisors, okay, they made it through, right? They survived, they grabbed the life preserver. Well, let's push them to another level. And that's the one thing that I would say I wish that would happen, because if they're successful, then it makes your recruiting easier. When I was at New York Life, there were many a sales manager who recruited to me. You can be that guy down the hall, right? And so you need those people to survive. You need those people not only to survive, but thrive in the industry as a model of what you could become. Right. Yep. In all my talks throughout the country, I'm always humbled when I meet people and they say, hey, I saw you in this magazine, or I heard you speak and you're the reason I'm a financial advisor, or you helped me stay in that's so empowering. Right.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah. The hardest thing you're going to do is recruit what you don't have. Yep. I mean, that's the hardest time. You got to be a really good salesperson to recruit what you don't have. Now, once you get over that hurdle, this only gets easier. So we can help you through the hard part. We can help you through the I don't know how to do this because I don't have any. I'm not having any. You got to figure that one out, and we can help people do that. But once you start to do this, it can only get easier, and it only does get easier.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Chris. Any questions from the attendees?
There are a couple questions. This first one's for a selfie. This is Luz Ford, one of your former colleagues from New York Life. She recently resigned as a partner to start her own practice, and she's looking for anything you could give her as far as advice to help her grow her brand and become a little bit better known in the advisor world. She's a Latina widow, if that helps.
Yeah, I mean, it probably as much in the Hispanic market as the African American market. There's a lack of financial literacy. If you follow me on social media, whether it be Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, I'm probably out there as much as any advisor in this space. So definitely grow your social media presence. You can do that yourself. There's firms I could refer you to if you want to reach out to me. I could refer you to some firms that I work with to do social media marketing. But that's important. And then telling your authentic story, because there are people who are like you, right, that don't know you exist. And when they know you exist and they know that you're building something, they'll want to be a part of that, right? So you're not equipped to, nor would you even want to deal with anybody. You don't need everybody. You just need the select few, right? So that'd be my piece of advice. I mean, you're independent, which is scary, right? You can do anything you want now, I guess, right? But there's also no exact path also laid out for you as well, so it can be a bit nerve-wracking. But I would say take every day as it comes, focus on winning the day. Again, market yourself and start with the end in mind. Where do you want to be 5 years, 10 years from now, and then what are the things you can actively do on a daily basis to get there.
Thank you, Selfie. Selfie said he's on social media. I see a Selfie more than I see my wife. He's on social media so much. True story. Chris, you have another question?
Yeah, so it sounds like a selfie's still doing a lot of personal production. Could we see your name a lot attached to something called the Taylor Method? Is there a quick 30 seconds, 45 seconds you can give us on that, a selfie?
Sure. So I am an active advisor. I'm the principal of Taylor Insurance and Financial Services. And that's my independent practice. Is about 50% insurance, 50% investments. I'll do about $1 million a year in production on the life insurance side. Do about $1.5 million or so in the investment side. So I'm a top of the table producer. I have my own brokerage general agency, Taylor Brokerage, as well. So I work with agents throughout the country. And then the Taylor Method is basically the culmination of my career's triumphs and failures. Everything that I say, everything that I do, everything I've learned in my 20 years of business, I've put online. So the Taylor Method is a subscription model. It is carrier agnostic. It is product agnostic. It is process driven. Here's how I develop relationships with clients, get them to open up to me, and how I go through my sales planning process. So we have a variety of programs, from boot camps to coaching platforms on there and video access. So look up taylormethod.com. You can get more about that, hear more about that program.
Thank you. Thank you, Selfie. Chris, any other additional questions?
Yes, this one's for Gary. So it's about the Ivy Planning Group. Can you give us an idea of who is kind of your ideal client and what type of work you've been doing recently?
Sure. So Ivy's a 30-year-old core business strategy consulting firm. We specialize in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So our clients, our normal client, it's Nike, it's L'Oreal, it's JP Morgan Chase, It's all the big guys. It's the Morgan Stanleys. It's all the big guys. About 65% of our work is private sector. About 30% would be the federal government, big government agencies that are trying to transform themselves. And then there's some other smaller organizations that typically fall into, some associations or small organizations that are trying to turn the corner on something. So for us, the thing that ties our clients together is they're trying to take a strategic approach to understanding, how do I harness the power of difference to create competitive advantage. So so any organization that says, I got to harness the power of difference to create competitive advantage, economic advantage, they fall into that family. So mostly big companies, but it's not uncommon that we'll get a call from someone that says, I got to figure out how to do this multicultural thing. And that's why Vince and I have been friends for, a lot of years, because that problem we've been solving, and we kind of have a sense of what to go do about it. But that's what we look like. Right now, what am I busiest doing? Responding to COVID and George Floyd and the social injustice, and helping a lot of organizations move from the crisis of now to doing diversity, equity, inclusion in a sustainable way, and in a way that actually makes the organizations better. So that's probably that's been my day job, it seems like, since March. But that's the work we do. Thanks.
Chris, I want to respect participants' time, and we're up on an hour and a minute. So we're going to end the call. If there are additional questions, you could write into us. We'll respond to them. We're also going to tape this and put this on our website. I really want to thank first all the participants for being on here today, the attendees, and also want to thank Aselfi and Gary. I think you guys were great, unscripted, talked about your families, talked about your practices, what you do, and some things that you've overcome in your personal life, which we really, really appreciate. So thank you very much. And Chris, thanks for doing a great job.